This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.
Welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I am your host. And by the way, sometimes we talk about politics and not religion without killing each other. And you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. I am your host, Corey Nathan. It is an honor to be a part of the Democracy Group, which is a network of podcasts that examines what's broken in our democracy and how we can work together to fix it. And remember, I say this all the time, if you could subscribe or follow, depending on what your app lets you do, that really does help. And definitely the ratings help, especially writing a review. If your app, like Apple Podcasts is the big one, if you can write a review, it helps us up the rankings. It brings more people into the conversation so that more folks can participate in the conversations like the one we're having today with Kate Cohen. Kate Cohen is a Washington Post columnist who writes about the intersection of culture, family, and politics. I've been enjoying her column for years, and she is the author of 3 books, which I've been enjoying. I haven't read the middle one yet, but we'll be talking about the most recent one, which is titled We of Little Faith, Why I Stopped Pretending to Believe, and maybe you should too. What I love about this title is that it's kind of like you saying, I'll take your whole proselytization thing and I'll raise you a gentle suggestion. I really appreciated that. Was that part of the thinking or what? The
whole subtitle thing. Well, the whole title thing goes on for years in my own head and then with my agent and then the people that we sold this idea to really liked We of Little Faith, but then it was a whole process of the subtitle and getting just the right amount of humor. I strive to be entertaining and funny, and so getting just the right amount of humor, getting all the information in there. This is a memoir about my own journey. It also, posits a destination of like honesty about one's beliefs as a good place to be personally and politically. And so I want to get that in there. I didn't want to be scoldy. It was tough, but I like what we came up with. It always makes me smile when I say the entire title, and I think that's a good sign.
I like it. It is an art, like making a title or, distilling an entire piece of work, or in this case, a memoir, so an entire life down to a few words. There's an art to that. I did want to start. I've never done this before, and the way that I want to start, I'm going to share something with you, and I just want to get your reaction to it. And let me know if you can hear this.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear that?
Mm-hmm.
There's 199 churches in between me and the nearest airplane. 199 churches.
I love that song.
Isn't it great? I might need somebody to help me with copyright issues.
Shine upon you.
I'll look into it for you.
Green and red or stained glass windows. See Jesus at the altar, walking over water, or melting in the arms of his mother.
Oh, so good.
After a lifetime of raising the dead, one miracle looks a lot like any other.
That's great. All right, so tell me, what does that, how can you describe what you're experiencing when you listen to music like that?
I confess to being proud. That's my son. And
it's really good, by the way. It's like I started listening to his stuff. Oh, man.
He is so good. And that's that makes me so happy that you found it, because, he is very, just for everybody listening, my son is Jesse Cohen-Greenberg, and he features prominently in the book, We of Little Faith, because part of it is a memoir of raising my kids. And he's the musician who keeps popping up in various spots. And now he's a senior in college. And he put his first album together. It's available everywhere, but nobody's really listening to it because he's just so much more interesting. I mean, he loves to perform and he loves to compose, and he just moved on to the next one. And I keep saying, Jesse, you got to get on TikTok. You got to get, all that stuff. But he's good, isn't he? Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
When I heard it, I was almost done with the book and I started listening to the music. And when I heard it, I'm like, this makes so much sense. Like musical virtuosity, but there's a whimsy to it and a literacy to it. And it's just all the things that it just makes so much sense. It's inspired.
I would say all my kids are writers, and Jesse, absolutely, he has that musical part too, but the writing, the whimsy, the wordplay.
One of the things I was curious about, it turns out that our kids are almost exactly the same ages. When you told me in our notes before we got on when we were sharing notes in the subsequent days and weeks, and you said your kids are 23, 21, and 18, I'm like, oh man, I'll pray for you.
I will say, I appreciate that. I do not reject that.
So there was a clarity as you described certain decisions that you were making and how you were going to raise your kids, not just about, raising your kids atheists, which we'll talk about, but there were other you had this equilibrium that you were able to articulate. I don't know if you articulated it that way at the time, but certainly in the book, about, for example, when they lied to you, that you understood what that was, that they were sort of prisoners in this world of yours. Yeah, and the only space of freedom that they had was when they had a thought and in between that and what they said, how were you able to arrive at that kind of clarity and to maintain that as sort of like the compass, a bunch of these things, a lot of this wisdom around which you raised your kids?
I don't think I always was clear in the moment when I raised my kids, but I was pretty good at sort of depersonalizing, our interactions and understanding that sometimes I had to play a role, sometimes they had to play a role. I mean, maintaining, it's probably some of it is simply the way I am. I'm very even keel, and I don't get angry easily. So I don't necessarily take credit for, mastering my lesser emotions. They just don't, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's as big, hard a thing for me to sort of be like, okay, I understand that you're saying you hate me. I know you don't hate me. I don't have to rise to that kind of, emotional challenge. Yeah. And in fact, it might help you if I don't. I don't know that that's always true. Sometimes I felt like I should show them when they're hurtful. They need to know. It's a balance, And I think what I say to anyone who had children, even slightly after I did, because of course, one of the great joys of having kids is that then you get to advise other parents. So I always say, you can always revise, you can always go back, and in fact, it's a wonderful thing to teach your kids, that you can say, hey, wait, what we were talking about, I don't think I said it right. Or I apologize for reacting the way I did, or, all those things. I tried to keep that in mind. It's an ongoing thing, so I was good at it sometimes, and I sometimes had to remind myself about it. But yeah, lying, I did have friends who would be so mad that their kid lied to them. And I would think, I mean, in that situation, I kind of get it. I get why they hid this from you, because I know how you would have responded. And, they were doing the thing that they thought was the smartest in the moment. So, but lying, I mean, that's, I do go off on a little detour about lying, because I am fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by the fact that what is going on inside our heads doesn't necessarily show through. That seems like an amazing thing, that we can keep those two things separate, but it's not always the best way to go. And in terms of raising kids, I felt really early on like I needed to be honest with them in order to have a really strong relationship with them, where they could see the way that I saw the world clearly, and not, through any kind of, I don't know, obfuscation.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the moments in the book that stood out for me was how unmomentous, if you will, when you decided to raise your kids as atheists. So I was wondering if you could describe that moment and that decision.
Sure. Well, before that moment, I think, was this realization that I felt when I had kids, that I was responsible for what they knew about the world. When they're little, it's just amazing. You can tell them anything.
Right. Yeah.
And it is this awesome responsibility, which I was determined to rise to. And so, the beginning of the book kind of chronicles a few decades of more or less pretending that I was a believer. I was raised Reform Jewish. We did sort of all the things, synagogue and Sunday school, and I was bat mitzvah. And I really didn't let anybody know for the longest time that I never believed any of the things that I was saying. I enjoyed a lot of it. I enjoyed all the family stuff. I enjoyed learning my prayers for my bat mitzvah. So I took pleasure in it, but I never believed that there was an actual supernatural, being in charge. And I didn't tell anybody or ask my parents what they actually thought, any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And this kind of went on, and I married another non-believer. He knew what I really thought. But he was raised Jewish also. We had a Jewish wedding, and, there was just a certain amount of not wanting to rock the boat with the in-laws, knowing that I couldn't really, or thinking that I couldn't really tell people that I didn't believe in God, that people sort of expect you to believe in God as sort of like a baseline decent thing. Anyway, all of that is sort of the background, sort of me sort of politely hiding the fact that I didn't believe. And then I had kids, and I just couldn't sort of do the going through the motions part anymore. I just felt like it was too important to, tell the truth to them as I saw it about the way the world worked. Okay, so that is how I was feeling.
Right.
And that, led me be one of those really sort of probably obnoxious people that's like constantly talking to their kids and constantly narrating everything. And I'm really seeking to have everything I said be the truth, or at least what I was thinking in my head, like that there would be no distance between those two things. And so the moment of deciding to raise them atheists, which wasn't even exactly a decision, was we were sitting down and reading a book of Greek myths. We were starting this book of Greek myths, and one of the boys, I only had 2 kids at the time, or the little one wasn't up to reading. I can't remember how old she was. wanted to know what a myth was, didn't know what a myth was. So I just said, well, a myth is a story that people tell themselves about the way the world works. It's how they try to understand how the world works, but it's a made up story. And it's just, and they said, oh, yes, they said, well, so they don't believe it anymore. And I said, well, if they don't believe it, they call it a myth. If they do still believe it, we call it religion. And that's like the stories about Moses that we hear at Passover. That's like the stories about Christmas and Jesus. Those are myths too, but we call them religion because people still believe in it. And that is kind of how that conversation started. Mm-hmm. And then it didn't stop. It's still going on.
Yeah. One of the things I really appreciate is that you have this automatic translation device, that you have these complex ideas and beliefs that you're able to transmit to your kids throughout this, the narrative. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, I lacked that special skill. When my kids asked me a question, I would go off into, the eschatological theory of blah, 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 and they're 3 and they're like, what?
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, so you're not going to get it right necessarily. You're not an expert in what they can understand at what age anyway. I think that to me, the basic thing was not lying to them. So even if I didn't quite get it right, even if I thought, they probably didn't need to know that much about sex, or, they got bored, and walked away. It was, to me, baseline, I wasn't lying and I wasn't avoiding the question. Those two things were like, because it's my job to be that resource. Yeah. And I think to model the idea that you can not know for sure things, right. And that's okay. And that you can talk through them with people that you trust, and all that stuff was part of what I was trying to be, the kind of relationship I was trying to have, and what I was trying to model. And the modeling part is how come I ended up telling more than just my children that I believe that God was a human invention. That's what made me take the little steps out into like, okay, I can't just be honest with them. I have to be honest more generally in life. That's how I stopped pretending to believe.
Before we move on, I wanted to tell you about something else that's important. Money. Specifically your money. In all seriousness, I wanted to tell you about my advisor and my friend, George Meza. George runs Meza Wealth Management. And with George, it's not just about money. It's about helping us manage our present and plan for our future. And unlike a lot of other firms out there, George and I actually have a relationship. He knows me, he knows my family, and I know his wonderful family. I also know his firm and the incredible team he's put together, from his chief investment officer to some of the other great people in his office, like Jessica, their head of operations, that are always there to help me and with all aspects of our portfolio. You see, the thing is, I got a lot going on. I guess we all got a lot going on, and I don't have the time to watch our investments all day, every day. And even if I did, I don't have the experience and expertise that George's team collectively has. So we get the entire Meza Wealth Management team, all their expertise and all their integrity. And again, it's based on George knowing me personally, knowing my goals, and even the kind of risk that's appropriate for me to take, which, by the way, could change from one season to the next. And they're on top of all of that. So if you want George Meza and Meza Wealth Management to be on your team, just visit their website, mezawealth.com. That's MEZA wealth.com, www.mezawealth.com. And that will also be in our show notes, so you can check that. And now, back to our show. So you describe certain times, rites of passage in particular, where it put you very much at odds with certain family members, in particular, your father-in-law, who, from what I understand, is he still with us? Is he?
Yes.
So attends an Orthodox synagogue like I grew up in. And especially like around the boys' bris, the time for bris, or the oldest, and then the oldest when it was time for bar mitzvah. And it was a separation, a declaration of your separation in a way, declaration of this is our family, this is what we're doing. And it was hard because it ran against very fundamental moorings of what your father-in-law is all about, with his very meaning of life and family. So I was wondering if your kids, my kids certainly have approached me, because my oldest is 23, the middle one is about to be 21, and the youngest is 19. So we've gotten to that point where our kids have brought to us ideas, convictions, decisions that were like, whoa, oh my, like, this is so I was curious if if your kids have come to you and like, hey, I believe in God, I'm going to this church, or if there's been anything like that that's really shaken you that way.
Not yet. Nope. I would be surprised. But I would also be surprised because we do all communicate pretty well and pretty constantly. I would be surprised not to have any inkling, I mean, I suppose they might hide it from me because obviously they might know that it would be, let's just say, an object of interest for me.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be. I feel like, and I hope I didn't slip up very often in the book, but I feel like I'm not very judgmental about people's need for comfort, people's need for structures in their lives, I completely understand. I feel like I do, and I hope that I expressed a real compassion for the religious impulse.
Yeah.
So I would hope that they would, I would hope that they would know that I wouldn't scoff at anything they brought to me like that, because I feel like I understand where that desire comes from.
Right. Yeah.
So, but not so far.
So I have a very unscientific theory, very early stages of this theory, because we haven't talked about this much. My theory, though, is that because the basic currency of your relationship with your kids is honesty, that's why, number one, you might not, it's hard to imagine that they'd bring something to you that would be met with such surprise or even outrage.
Yeah.
Because there is an open transparency to the relationship.
There is, but I'm not going to say that there's nothing I don't keep from them for whatever reason. And I'm sure the same is true the other way. And I wouldn't, want them to feel like they couldn't have a private life, for example, or something like that. I guess I want to, and I hope and I believe that we established over the years a sense that, that I love them no matter what, and that I was open to talking about anything.
My love is contingent upon them doing everything that meets my approval. They have to know that.
Well,
that's how I raised my kids.
I will say this. They also know that I'm a highly critical, judgmental person, in terms of certain things that I'm like, I wasn't great about, praising everything that they did. I praise the effort, but not necessarily the output or whatever. I wasn't that kind of a parent. But I feel like they, maybe you'll have to interview them sometime, but I feel like we could separate those things, partly because they are all artists in some way. So they have, I think there's this, in addition to the honesty thing, there is this respect for one another as artists, and as, sort of the ability to separate who you are from what you're producing. And we can take a step back from that and talk about if it's working or not and all that stuff. So we also have this separate creative relationship, which is really great, so I'm thinking now that when I do find out, that Jesse believes in God, it'll be through a song, and I'll be like, "Ha!"
That'd be great.
Text him
awesome.
frantically. What's up, dude?
So I was curious if so a little bit of background. I became a Christian, grew up Orthodox, going to an Orthodox synagogue, very observant, and my dad, davens every day, and goes to Chabad, and so it's a major part of our life. So in my late 20s, when I went to them and said, I'm a Christian, it was kind of a big deal. I noticed something when I was reading your book, because it's exactly the kind of book that my dad would have sent to me in those early years. When he still won't own up to this, but my mother tells me that his first reaction when I told him was he wanted to sit Shiva for me. He came around to, I give him a lot of credit, because he came around to, as strong as his conviction was about me becoming a Christian, he valued his relationship with his son more than those deep convictions, awesome. Which, it is awesome. But it doesn't mean that the conflict went away. There was great conflict for years. And one of he would send me these books, I would send him books. And, one of the treatises he sent me was, "You take Jesus, I'll take God," so a lot of times what we would send each other in terms of articles or books, I found myself at that time, this is 2000, 2001. So we were a lot younger. I was reading it and arguing with the text as I was reading it. Mm-hmm. So I bring that up because your book is exactly the kind of book my dad would have sent to me to, hey, at least be an atheist. At least that would be,
I was going to ask you. Yeah. Yes. If that would be a preferable direction.
Oh, absolutely.
For him.
There's any number of things, non-theistic, philosophical traditions that he could have bought, Buddhism, or, just any number of things, or identity oriented stuff. If I said I was gay, I think that would have gone over fine. Atheist makes logical sense. He understands the logical, the logical leaps that we have to make in order to believe, if you will. But I bring all of that up, a little bit of background, because I wasn't arguing with your text. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Huh. I want to know more now. So it partly
you're
speaks
saying,
to,
oh, okay. So you're saying it wasn't something that I don't know, had your back up in any way. It was more, you felt invited to the discussion more than.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously things where I find myself disagreeing, and wanting to say, hey, I'm a Christian dude, and that's not quite what I think. Can I offer some? So
I'm mischaracterizing something.
Yeah. So there are some of those, but it wasn't like, oh, she has it all wrong, and you need to think that,
Right.
So it's partly my own. Maybe it's my own. I'm 53. I'm almost 53 now, so that has something to do with it. But I think a lot of it has to do with the way that you wrote in a winsome. You wrote in a winsome enough way to make it approachable for someone who believes differently than you do. I was wondering, though, that it seems like you spoke to a lot of folks who are religious about God. Were there any types of religions or people of a certain tradition that you had a lot less interest in talking or wanted to avoid even?
I mean, I think I spoke to people about God primarily that I didn't know which way they believed. I did not approach, let's say there's some ultra Orthodox Jews around here, and they came to the farm once to, I don't know, buy some chickens. And I mean, there's certainly a way in which I felt too culturally different to even. Also, these people are not part of my life. I mean, I think one thing is that I didn't go out out into the world to sort of say, hey, by the way, I don't believe in God, or hey, by the way, this is a beautiful thing that people have created and not a thing that exists outside of whatever.
Yeah.
I didn't go out to do that. It was more, I made it kind of an internal mission when it came up, not to shy away from saying what was true. And so it was really only people that I knew anyway, or was in conversation with anyway. And it was really a very undramatic process of my wanting people to like me, and therefore being tempted to just not say what was true, and then pushing myself a little bit more to be honest, to the extent that I really engage with some theological questions in the book. I feel like this is so revealing. I feel like that's from reading.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like I'm engaging with C.S. Lewis or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I'm not afraid to engage with C.S. Lewis because he's not right there in front of me. Yeah. So in terms of the more the sort of deeper discussions about these things, I think in the book they, and maybe this is a failing, they are less. They're less with real people. Well, no, C.S. Lewis is a real person, but they're less with like personal discussion and more with like, I'm engaging in these arguments with writers.
I think that type of exercise is a really healthy exercise. Mm-hmm. I'll say it in like the word I'm thinking of is in an academic way. It's really good that we've been doing this for a few thousand years, like having conversations across generations with other people who think about this stuff seriously and engage with other people who think about this stuff seriously. So I love the fact that you dove into C.S. Lewis and some other writers and thinkers and engaged with them. It's an important exercise. That actually, so I was wondering, you grew up, your dad is a Shakespeare professor.
Yes.
Your mom, I don't know exactly but I get that she's really into grammar.
That is absolutely true.
Okay.
My mom, for a little while, well, she's an amazing woman. She highly educated, and then stay-at-home mom for a while, and then she was a travel agent for a while, and then she worked in the international programs at the university where my father worked. And she was an administrator. She's one of those people with skills that go far beyond and deeper than, what the, work experience, lines in the resume would be, and so grammar and proofreading, she is just an ace.
That's great. That's great.
She is an ace. And after the whole experience, and she was my final go-to on this book, I sent her a little necklace with a fine-tooth comb as a little charm, because she's great. So anyway, yes, my dad's a Shakespeare professor. There were books everywhere. Books everywhere.
So I would imagine that was a pretty fertile intellectual ground for you to think about big ideas at a relatively young age. So I was curious, at what point, first of all, what does it mean to be an atheist? Seems like an obvious question, but it's really not. As you talk about it, I'm like, I didn't think of it that way. And then also, could you tell us how you arrived at the conclusion that you're, in fact, an atheist?
Sure. An atheist believes that God is a human invention. That's my sort of preferred way of saying it, because I feel like to say I don't believe in God is an oversimplification in a way. Like, God is just such an amazing character.
Yeah.
And such a useful character, and such a powerful character. So to say it doesn't exist isn't quite right. But I believe that God is a human invention. So And sometimes I say I don't believe there's a supernatural being in charge of the universe. That's another way that I say it.
Yeah.
And so neither of those things, conclusions did I arrive at intellectually.
Okay.
I believe that I just never thought of God in any other way than as a literary character or a legend, like a cultural legend or something like that. That could it could be because I was raised in books and stories and plays and, where Hamlet was featured large in my imagination, about the same.
Yeah.
Or, so it could certainly be that's part of it. My head was always in books and it just seemed like the same kind of thing. You read anything in the Old Testament and you're like, wow, this character is crazy.
Yeah.
Or I just read the Ten Commandments with this real sense of this incredible character of who's insists that he's going to be worshipped and he's going to be worshipped in the correct way. And if you don't worship him in the correct way, then what happened to the Egyptians is going to happen to you. And I mean, that's how it all sounds to me.
Yeah.
So I don't remember ever sitting there and praying either out loud or when I was supposed to pray silently or anything like that, and actually thinking that it did anything. I would not have called myself an atheist. I wouldn't, I don't know. I guess I didn't really probably put the word to it until, I don't know, maybe high school, maybe college. I just didn't. I was Jewish. I was a Jew.
Right. And you could be an atheist and a Jew at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I know that now.
Yeah.
I know that now. But I didn't think of it. I guess I was afflicted by the same thing that I think a lot of other people are afflicted by, which is the sense that atheism is like a scary thing, or that you have to be sort of an aggressive person to be an atheist, or you have to be angry or argumentative.
Yeah.
None of which I am.
Right.
And all no. So to feel like that label fit me, it took me a while.
What's funny is I engage with either the writing of or just in conversation with others who are atheists. I find the writing of guys like Dawkins to be a lot less persuasive and thought-provoking, just because a lot of it is just I don't know, obnoxious isn't the right word, but maybe aggressive. And I can understand why he might be aggressive in the environment that he's grown up in. And, Hitchens, I always found funny and thought-provoking. But when I go back to the stuff that Bertrand Russell, especially in his conversations with other guys like G.K. Chesterton, that's the stuff that I find most persuasive.
Yeah.
And now in conversation, somebody who's become a dear friend, a guy, John Rausch, I think I shared one of the episodes, one of the conversations I had with him. His stuff, it really, some of the stuff that we talk about, I have to go and process for days, if not weeks. He's coming out with this book, and it's a framework that we've been talking about for a couple of years now. The 4 M's, we refer to it. I don't know if that's how he's going to refer to it in the book, but basically he broke down the, atheists and theists. There are 4 M's, and I'm going to forget them off the top of my head, but morality, mortality, murder. I knew I'd forget the 4th M, but there's a couple that theists, it's hard for atheists to reckon with, and there's a couple of them that theists can't reckon with that atheists,
right.
I love those conversations because listen, at the end of the day, I want to believe what's true, and if I'm wrong, I want to know it. So,
right.
So, sorry.
No, that's okay. I think that I think what's missing from some of the work of the new atheists, for me anyway,
Magic.
is
that was the one. Murder and magic. Yeah.
That's good.
Sorry.
And I will say not all, because I do quote Daniel Dennett, and I think Dennett always had a more humane kind of approach and still does. And he currently gets excluded from references to new atheists because he's just a really nice guy who doesn't have that same I don't know, combative side. But I think what's missing is just sort of a compassion for how people need to get along in life and how people live their lives. And it's just sort of a sense of, I don't know, sympathy and charity and all those things. I think it's not just that it's only a rational argument. It's really not granting any leeway to anybody's, human need. And I think that it's useful for what it is. I enjoyed those books. But it's not gonna, to me, it's not gonna really bring in people who are struggling sort of in their daily life to figure out how to live meaningfully and, how to proceed with relationships they already have and kids they're raising and all that stuff. I mean, it just doesn't kind of speak to that for whatever reason.
The places where I found myself diverging from you is where we as individuals fit in with a larger story. And it gives us a sense of orientation, if you will. It gives us like where we, so there was a quote kind of early on in the book. You started a chapter with a quote from Katharine Hepburn. She said, "I am an atheist, and that's it. I believe there's nothing we can know except that we should be kind to each other and do what we can for other people." So we should be kind to each other and do what we can for other people. And that's kind of what you're saying, what you said in numerous ways throughout the book. And my question is, but how do we know that? Like, and if we know that, then the question is why? Why should we be kind to each other? And it's not like, I'm not one of those like, oh, well, I got to be kind because there's this, the God of the Old Testament is going to strike me down and I'm going to burn in hell. Like, that's not where I'm coming from. I'm wondering what is the rationale? Where does that impulse to be good to each other come from? Do you understand what I'm
I hear
asking?
what you're saying. I mean, I definitely think that there's a sort of fundamental thing that humans do where they kind of associate, extrapolate from their own thoughts and feelings to other people, and then they and then their sort of morality springs from this sense that they wouldn't want to do to other people what they wouldn't want done to them. I mean, it's a simple golden rule kind of a thing.
I love that part where you invented a new version of it and you're like, okay, fine, that's the golden rule.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. There must be something, that's inside of us, because every single religion, every single culture has this concept, which I don't know. I'm not I feel like there's neurobiology involved. I feel like there's subject matter involved that I don't have a grasp of, but I guess I don't feel like I need to know that.
That's interesting.
I don't feel like I need to understand where my sense of right and wrong comes from exactly. I tease it out some, and I talk about how you can talk about it with your kids. Yeah. But I guess I feel like just because I don't quite understand it, doesn't mean that it's not true, that it's there. I mean, I think people do generally have a sense of right and wrong, that goes beyond what they're what might be taught in a holy book. And then that's part of that chapter about morality. Yes, there's the scene in where we're having Seder at my in-laws, and my kids are just appalled at how many babies die in the Exodus story.
It's
They're
a
just
fair
like
complaint.
appalled. They're like, it's a fair complaint. It's just gruesome, and they have this feeling that it is wrong, even though, we didn't take them to synagogue. We didn't, I just think there's this natural sense of not that you don't want babies to die. I don't know, that's not fair. But I can't explain it to you. I would be interested to go down that road sometime.
Yeah.
But I really think one of the projects I have in this book is kind of like lowering the bar to entry for being an atheist. And I think one of the things that I really believe is that, you don't have to be able to explain the Big Bang. You don't have to know, why humans are around. You don't have to know what your purpose is to look around and come to the conclusion that this one particular story about those things is just a story that someone made up,
Right.
So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not, but that's how I feel. I don't feel like I need to know why I think, baby killing is wrong, or why I think it's important to be kind to other people. Part of it is, it feels good to be kind to other people, and it feels, I want to be part of a community. I want to be loved and welcomed and valued, and being good to other people is part of that too, is part of building that community. So there's a very kind of, pragmatic side to it. I think when people say, if you don't believe in that someone's watching you, or if you don't believe in this or that, this person's or that person's moral code, then what's going to keep you from, going on a rampage or cheating on your taxes or any of those things? I mean, nothing keeps you from doing those things anyway.
Right.
I mean, it's not like very few people actually think they're going to be struck down if they do those things. So it is, even for believers, it is, I believe, more a sense of wanting to be in a society, and take care of your society than anything else.
Yeah, that tracks. I think that I've read some evolutionary biologists who say that it's part of a survival gene in us, and one that's evolved in such a way where we're driven to I don't even know how to say the word, propitiation of the species, if you will. That some of those things are connected to that. It kind of makes sense, but it somewhere around awe, a sense of awe.
Yeah.
That's where that argument starts to lose me. Like, on a walk, just seeing a sunset and just being stopped in or the first time I was at Prado and I walked into the room where Las Meninas is, and I was just, I don't know what that is. That's not merely an animalistic response,
Why isn't it? Why isn't that just a response to beauty and the knowledge and the just
because I don't see my dogs looking at me and being like, whoa, that's so cool, dude.
Yeah, but you're different from your dogs in a lot of ways.
Yeah. No, but that sense of awe and wonder.
I mean,
I don't know.
I don't think you have to believe in God to have a sense of awe and wonder. I mean, that is absolutely, I feel like, a love of art and an amazement that, that somebody can write a song.
So
that feeling when you hold a newborn baby, I mean, all of that stuff. I don't know why that has to come from sort of the supernatural world, and why it's not just, in us as people. I mean, I am so grateful it's in us as people. I think that's another thing that people think that atheists don't have, is this appreciation for these sort of magical moments in life. But I don't agree with that. I love those moments.
I'm looking at my notes. I'm like, I have 12 pages, and we're on page. We're like at the top of page 2 right now. So I need to have you back, or we need to
I would love that. There's so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about.
All right. So there's okay. So one of the longer quotes that where I did find I was a little bit more at odds with you, or maybe there was a clearer distinction. You say, if I'm being honest, though, I do expect to have an impact on the world. I expect something about me to reverberate. And I love all this. Perhaps I will live on in one of my children's taste for stationery or for salt, in a friend's slightly greater confidence in herself, in the one recipe of all recipes that a child of mine ends up using, which may not be the one recipe of my mother's that I still use, or maybe in the fact that they eschew all my recipes, believing like me that another might be better. So it's better to keep looking. So that's what I was referring to before, that there's something about placing oneself in a narrative, in a longer narrative that transcends generations. And that you're continuing that narrative. There's one of the theologians that things started to fall in place for me. This guy named Kevin Van Hooser said, the Bible at the end of the day is a story that's still being written, and we're in it, right? So but for me, even separate from my religious convictions, or theological convictions is a better way to put it, is that my bar mitzvah invitation started with, as my father and grandfather before me, and the girls that we were as my grandmother and grandmother. So that's what I think a lot of these rituals, these rites of passage, do for me. And I wonder if there's a way to be a Nathan, or be, the grandson of Krivals and Mertix and Kleinfelds, so that we can continue that story, even if we're while still being true to our beliefs, or your philosophical convictions. Does that make sense?
It makes so much sense. It makes me think, like, to what extent is it important to have a name for the thing that connects us? I mean, part of it is just, okay, so my grandfather was a Jew, his grandfather was a Jew. Is that really what matters? I mean, is that really the connection between us? I don't know. So let's say I take that out, and I try to think about what it is of my grandfathers that I still have, or that what am I continuing? That my grandfather was a obstetrician. One of them was an obstetrician in Montgomery, Alabama, and he was a progressive Jew and a voracious reader, and he loved to cook. He got his law degree just for fun at some point,
just for fun.
He's like, I don't know. He had a lot of lawyer friends, and they would always give him a hard time. So at some point he decided, well, I can do this too.
Yeah.
I remember. I mean, so, I feel like there's a lot that connects me to him that doesn't have to go through a synagogue or any particular ritual, I guess.
Yeah.
But I take your point that to fashion it into a story,
yeah,
it helps to have a name for it, an identity, a sort of people. But that's just one kind of story. I think there are other kinds of stories. And I part of me feels like I don't know. I'm just working this out as I'm saying it to you. I'm not sure that I would, I'm not sure how much I would care about the things that connected me to my grandfather if I didn't know him.
That's interesting.
I'm not sure. I mean, I have to think about it. How much does that matter? Obviously, those people, all my ancestors, the decisions they made, the way they lived, the children they had an effect on me, but to what extent does that matter in some larger way? I don't know. I would have to think about it. So, I'm really genuine in that part of the book. So this is the part of the book. This is in the second part of the book where I really try to wrestle with all the things that that religious people have and ask, do they need them? Do I need them? How do I get them as an atheist? So this is the part of the book about death is the one that you're talking about. And I really genuinely, I'm really genuine here. I really don't mind if I'm not remembered. I really don't mind. If I am not sort of consciously part of some future generation's story.
Oh boy.
It's okay with me.
Yeah.
I won't be around.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people feel very differently and take a lot of care with their legacies. And I just don't have that. I just have much more of a feeling of, I want to have good relationships now. I want to have a good day. I want to have, and maybe having good days involves a certain amount of planning or involves a certain amount of professional success or whatever it is. It's not that I'm only thinking about this moment in this moment, but when I'm gone, I'm gone.
Yeah.
And that is fine, and I hope that I do, on balance, I make I'm positive for the people around me until that point.
Yeah. No, I will confess that a lot of what propelled me into existential inquiry is the hate of death, the hate of the idea of death, right? Yeah. So what can I do to mitigate its effects, and to craft a life to mitigate the end of this individual life, Yeah. But as I get older, I should go back and rethink what started a lot of those inquiries, because it's not that I'm okay with death, but it's like, that's not a motivating factor at this stage, So I should go back to some of those early questions and kind of revisit them. I might come out the other side with some different conclusions. It's interesting.
Again, I am curious how much of this stuff is kind of like oddly just the way you're built.
Yeah.
But I will say that, my own death is not a great concern. I am, especially the older my kids get and the less I feel like they need me, that helps a lot. If one of them died, I mean, it's not like I don't fear that kind of void, but it would be a void in my life that I would be fearing. And I know they would be fine. They would be dead. So, I don't know. That one hasn't motivated me. In some ways, there is no way to motivate me to believe something I don't believe, though. So,
right.
I really enjoy wrestling with these issues and talking about it and trying to find, trying to understand what it is in myself, then, the sort of machinery that I use to deal with this thing that every human has to deal with, which is that they're going to die. So I'm curious about it. I wrestle with it. I have fun with it.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I do. But I ultimately, it's not like I could talk myself into believing something that I don't believe. I don't think.
Yeah.
Did you have to talk yourself into? Do you feel like that? Like that you had to?
That's interesting, because there was one part in the book, I don't have the quote in front of me, where you do put it that way, where it's like you have to talk yourself into believing in God. Where is that? Scripture.
Can people do that?
Talk themselves into believing in God?
Yeah.
Here it is. If mortality is why people want to believe in God, morality is why people think they should. And I don't think that's quite right. It's
okay.
It's stated in a way that assumes the default mindset or the reality is that there's no God and that we have to want to believe in God or feel that we should believe in God. Right?
Right.
And
I guess what I'm saying is, and I totally see your point, but more like people like me, people who aren't exactly believers, but they have this sense that they're supposed to, because that's where how else are you going to
like
teach
convention,
your kids right from wrong? Yeah. Like obviously that's where it comes from. Obviously that's where morality comes from. That's the beginning of the morality chapter. So then I get to talk about, obviously it's not where morality comes from, but yeah, you're right. I mean, that's I'm talking about those kind of are two different groups of people,
Yeah. Roush.
Second group, it would be more like the people who just think it's the right thing.
Yeah.
The thing that they're supposed to believe. Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And believe me, my dad and I have had many of these conversations over the course of almost 25 years now. Roush talks about it as like having a certain kind of vision. And some people, this is what he assigned to himself. It's like, it's almost as if he's colorblind and he doesn't see the whole color of God thing, so it's just not something that he gets. And it's his default posture, if you will. So there's, do you meditate by any chance?
No.
You were, there was one part where you were talking about,
trying to pray.
Yeah. Many days I walk up and down my driveway. One return trip is 1 mile, about 20 minutes at a thing. Oh, that's funny. We walk at about the same pace.
That's my thinking pace. I just have to say.
Oh, that's my sprinting pace. Are you kidding me? But the other thing you say, the first time I tried it, I got to step 1, being present with not me. And then my mind wandered and I pulled it back. The reason I thought that maybe meditating, because what I've learned is one of the practices is what's called noting. It's like, oh, that's a thought. Okay. That's and then maybe you say, oh, it's an unpleasant thought or a pleasant thought, and you let the thought pass. And then you just get back to the breathing thing. And I was reading, I'm reading up on like the neuropsychology, the neuropsychological processes. For me, it's more powerful. Meditating is more powerful than medication, because it literally changes the wiring in my brain. I felt that over the last couple of years.
I really need to do it. I need to do it.
Let me know if you want some recommendations.
I've heard that so many people have said that.
And listen, it's like when I started, it was my friend Dawn. I don't know if we were already recording, but my friend Dawn is the one who really pointed me in the right direction. It just started with like 3-minute, even 2-minute guided meditations. And I still do mostly guided meditations. Somebody like Tara Brach is great. She has a podcast where she does these 10 to 15-minute meditations on there. Or some of the apps, the one I use is Headspace, but it's like it's changed, and I was diagnosed as bipolar 2. I was originally diagnosed. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But it's important for my brain that I need to do this thing so that it doesn't go into these unhealthy zones. it's been pretty incredible. So anyway, maybe that's for episode 3 down the road that we can talk more about that. But if you want some recommendations, I'm happy to shoot
I
you
do want some recommendations. Now I'll come back and tell you if it works.
Okay, that'd be great. That'd be great. I do need to start to wind this down. So I want to ask you my TP&R question, and that is, what do you think each of us can do to be able to share space with, have better conversations with, perhaps even nurture relationships with people across these kinds of differences, people who have different backgrounds than we do or beliefs than we do, who get their news from different sources than we do? How can we be better at talking politics and religion without killing each other, or is it even possible?
Well, I think it's possible, but I confess that I've done that more with religion than with politics. And I feel like for me, the starting point is always a little bit of a leap. Like, I'm willing to take this leap of being honest in a way that people aren't normally honest, and to kind of assume that, you know, what is in your head isn't necessarily what I've seen or what's come out, and that if I really want to know how you think on a deeper level, I have to show you my willingness to show you what I think on a deeper level. So I think that is this sort of trusting that people are going to receive that honesty with at least some measure of grace, and sometimes gratitude for being willing to have a conversation. I have felt that. I spent 30 years thinking, oh, I got to protect other people or myself from the truth about myself, protect these relationships by being dishonest. And then I realized, of course, that the relationships were so much better when I was honest. I'm, for me, in a way, politics gets almost closer to my heart, and I think I'm trying to think if I've really been as forthcoming and honest. I mean, I write a column for the Washington Post. People know what I think, but you know, it's funny. I saw in your notes that you wanted to potentially talk about October 7th, which I've been to so many, I've had so many talks since then, and nobody asks about it, which is really interesting to me. But in a way, there is a space, a sort of node of conflict that I feel like I'm still not necessarily honest about when I should be. You know what I mean? Like again, preserving peace and quiet in, you know, sort of family discussions, or you know, here, or like you might be. I mean, we haven't talked about this at all, so I don't know where these issues fall in your own life or sort of social circle. But for me, as a progressive person, and as a Jew, there's definitely this sense that to keep the peace in certain situations, maybe I could, you know, let my own beliefs go unexpressed. And so I see, but I think that that's a problem. You know, I feel like it does a disservice, let's say, to my extended relatives to sort of assume they believe a certain thing, assume that would be in conflict with what I believe, assume there's no common ground, et cetera, and keep my mouth shut. I feel like that's a disservice. And it's an ongoing process for me to offer them the respect of being honest about, what my politics are or what my beliefs are in this particular political moment. So so it's a work in progress, but I think there's this sense of, do you respect the other person enough, trust the other person enough to share what your actual true feelings are about a situation? So I don't know if that's going to solve things, but
it feels to me like you're on the right track. You're pointed in the right direction, and you have some brakes at your disposal that you can press, and a sense of discernment as to when to press them.
Sure.
So,
right. I always tell people that who ask, what happened to my kids when they were unleashed in school without a belief in God or Santa or whatever it is. And I'm like, yeah, I taught them that God is a human invention. I also taught them to be polite and to be, kind.
Humans present in the grocery store, right?
Exactly. Yes. Other human beings. Exactly. So yes, I don't think the brakes are necessarily wrong, but sometimes we break more than we need to.
Yeah.
And I think that can impede, progress. I think it can, human understanding. So,
overly censoring ourselves means that we're ceding the ground to other voices in the room. And a lot of conversation in our various spaces, our collective village square, if you will, is dominated by these extremists, these categorical, you must be this way or that way, or you're, so do you have any questions for me?
Well, you have talked about how your dad reacted in terms of your becoming a Christian. And I just am curious about your mom. I mean, as a mom, I'm like, see, where's this invisible mom? What's going on?
Okay. So Phyllis, I had a 2-hour
conversation.
Yeah. She's not listening. She's thoroughly unimpressed with me. So I had this 2-hour long conversation. We took a red eye, flew in on Thanksgiving, got there, Newark, drove to they were still living in Jersey. And I sat on the porch with my dad for 2 hours and had this conversation about why I became a Christian. And then that was one interaction, and that was one thing. And then at the end of that talk, he said, "Okay, now you got to go in and tell your mother."
I love it.
I'm like, okay. So I just went in. Phyllis and I don't have that kind of relationship. So I was just going to roll out with it, tell her. And I did. I said, "Mom, I don't know how to say this any other way, so I'm just going to say it. I'm a Christian now." And she was like, she wasn't even looking at me. She was typing on the computer, and it was almost as if her fingers like floated off the keyboard as she was floating into the other room, and she was just kind of dazed. And I followed her into the other room. I'm like, "Mom, did you hear me?
Did you hear me?
I'm a Christian." And she said, "I'm sorry. I just never thought I'd have a son who was," and she didn't have the words. She goes, "who was walking with Jesus?" And then she starts yelling into the other room. She starts yelling Yiddish into the other room. "Ronnie, du hast, our son is a born-again Republican." And I'm like, I don't know how she connected. I mean, I kind of do, but I'm like, I didn't say Republican, Mom. "Oh, well, that would be terrible."
That's awesome.
So, yeah, my mom is, she is, it makes it better for me to kind of mythologize her a little bit, because then I can appreciate the humor in all of, the legend of Phyllis. So yeah, that's how she reacted.
And how did you have kids yet? Was this before?
So that was
or right about the time.
Yeah. So Savannah was born in March of 2001. So yeah, so Elisa was pregnant with Savannah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, so a lot of this was pressing in a way for them.
Sure.
It didn't necessarily have to where we were as a couple and as in planning a family, it didn't necessarily influence that evolution for me as much as you might think. But for them, it became pressing because they asked, like, well, what if it's a boy? What about the bris? You know, how are you going to raise your kids? We did ultimately, by the way, so our second and third kids are boys, and we did decide to have the bris for both of the boys. And it was far enough along after this time. So Jack was born in July of 2003 and in Emerson, February of 2005. So we were far enough along in this conversation, in particular with my dad, where I thought, listen, it doesn't betray my own theological beliefs. And it's a way for me to rebuild this bridge and honor my father and honor my family in this particular way. So that's the conclusion that we came to.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. The conversations around that and the bar mitzvah, there was a different tone to it. And I think I might have reacted differently because my dad has the proclivity too, to like sort of want to control things at times.
Yes. Right.
And impose his will at times. So if he was doing that at that time, I might have come to a different conclusion. But
he was more sort of struggling to understand you.
Yeah.
He wasn't trying to. Yeah.
So, and it allowed me to give that as a gift to him in a way.
Gotcha.
As well as to sort of nurture that relationship, you know? So, and I'm glad we did it. Because I'm still Jewish. Like when I go to shul on Saturdays, sometimes with my dad on Shabbos, the Rabbi Choni is his name. And he said to me, he's like, because he gives me an aliyah whenever I go. And the first or second time he did it, I'm like, Choni, I'm a Christian. He's like, well,
you still believe.
You're a little off base about Mashiach, but you're still a Jew. You can't change your face, you know? So.
No, it's really hard to get out of that. They're like, I mean, if you can go up there and do the blessings, they're not going to get rid of you. Are you kidding me?
I stumble over it a little bit.
I see that. I see that Christianity can be additive. You know, there's something like, okay.
Yeah.
So it's funny.
Before we go, how can folks follow you online, keep up to date with all your writing and all the great work that you're doing?
Yeah. So I do have a website, katecohen.net. You can contact me through that. And also you can look me up at the Washington Post. I do 1 or 2 columns a month, and about everything. Religion comes up a lot, but you know, I wrote a piece about the Barbie movie recently, and, you know, so I like to think about stuff, and I like to have a good time. I think one of my highest goals is definitely to entertain I think thinking about things is entertaining, but I think jokes are entertaining too. So you get both.
Yeah. I'm trying to figure out why Barbie, Bud Light, and Taylor Swift have been elevated to this, like, it's not just like a political difference. It's like a religious difference. Like, well, you can't possibly be a Christian and drink Bud Light and listen to Taylor Swift. You know, I'm like, what are you like?
What?
How did we get here?
Well, that is a whole other. Yes, we should definitely get back together for that one.
Oh,
fascinating.
Man. Fascinating, right?
Fascinating.
So,
yes.
Before we go, we covered a lot. Is there anything important we haven't discussed yet that you'd like to add for this edition of the Kate and Corey podcast?
I mean, we didn't really talk about the connection between atheism and politics exactly, which I would be, which you know, the comes up. I kind of like elbow that to the side for a lot of the book, because I want to talk about being honest with your kids, and I want to work out, you know, ways to live a meaningful life that don't rely on the supreme authority.
Right.
But I also feel, and this comes through maybe more in my in the column that I wrote for the Washington Post in October when my book came out, and I would send people to that column, and I'll send that to you so you can
that'd be great.
link it.
Yeah.
There is a way in which not believing that there's a supernatural being in charge of things connects, at least in my mind, but I think in political reality too, with believing that the earth or the world today, society today, is the way that humans made it, and that if anything is going to change it, it has to be us. So atheists have a really strong record of political activism, and I think that is at the heart of it, is just this sense of like, it's on us.
Yeah.
And let me just say that there are incredible religious leaders whom I admire deeply, who are, as I would describe it, acting like atheists in the sense that they're not leaving justice up to the divine. They're not putting that a responsibility on another creature. They are taking on that responsibility, and I'm all for that. It's not that you have to be an atheist in order to take responsibility for the world that it is. But if you are an atheist, you can't think that God is going to bail you out. So so that's one thing we didn't talk about. But
you might be surprised to know that we probably agree. We end up at the same place, even on things like prayer in public places, or sanctifying through prayer a public meeting and things like that. We end up at the same place, albeit for different reasons. But that's I'd love to explore that further.
We have so much to discuss. That can be the end of the podcast. We have so much to discuss. I can't wait.
This will be great. Well, thank you so much. This was really more than I could have expected, and that's saying a lot. I was really looking forward to this, so I really enjoyed spending some time with you.
It's been a total pleasure.
Oh, good. And as always, if you dig what we're doing here, remember to follow this show and write that review. Tell a friend about talking politics and religion without killing each other. We're easy to recommend. Just tell your friends to go to their favorite podcast app and type in "without killing each other." Without the G in the killing, without killing each other, and you'll find our big purple logo. You can find me online at Corey S. Nathan. That's Corey with an E and S as in Scott, at Corey S. Nathan. Now, by the way, that was a Phyllis thing. I was saying S as in Sam, but my middle name is actually Scott. So that's Phyllis has her, fingerprints all over this thing.
She's good.
Yeah. Now, if I could talk politics and religion with Phyllis with gentleness and respect, then there's hope. There's hope for the universe. But go talk some politics and religion with gentleness and respect, and have a great week.